Hey, what's up guys? In this week's video, I'm going to be sharing some of the top things that I do to streamline my photography workflow. For those of you who haven't heard yet, I recently started a private Facebook group for photographers to connect with each other, ask questions, share their workflow and experiences. If that's something you might be interested in, feel free to join and stay connected in the link down below. Tip number one being to start culling your photos while you're shooting. I know that you can't do this at every shoot when you're in a rush, but if you have the time, I would highly recommend to start rating your photos inside your camera while you're shooting. It's a huge time saver in post when you have to go cull through your images. And if you're shooting portraits, I find that it's really helpful to have your model look at the photos and tell you about which angles they like. As a result, I feel like you'll be getting better results because if you're checking in with what the model likes, then you might be able to find a perspective that neither of you would have thought on your own. And in already having ratings by the end of your shoot, that means when you pop your SD card in the computer, then you have less photos to cull through on your end. Tip number two is to be using a photo cataloging software, something such as Lightroom. I personally, like a lot of photographers, use Lightroom. Lightroom is great because it allows you to filter and organize your photos, select your pics, as well as edit your photos. However, if you're just starting out, you can use something like Windows 10 Photos or Apple Photos to get started. You won't be having as much control or features within these native apps on your computers, but it's definitely enough to get started. There are a couple of Lightroom alternatives that you might be able to find on the internet. I personally haven't tried them myself, but I will leave a link in the section down below if you guys want to check out some free Lightroom alternatives. Tip number three is to create a standard naming scheme and file system for all your photos. One of my biggest pet peeves when delivering photos to clients is actually delivering appropriately named files. Having a good naming scheme makes your workflow more tidy, makes it easier to find things in the future if you ever need to reference them, and it's a setting you can change as part of your output settings in Lightroom. The naming scheme I use to keep myself organized is the name of the shoot, the number of the output file, a hyphen, the month, and the year I shot it. I'll leave that on the screen for you guys to see. Tip number four is to not hold on to too many lenses at one time. I know I've definitely been guilty of this in the past, but when it comes to bringing out your camera and going out to shoot, I find that it's best to just hold on to the lenses or the focal lengths that you actually are going to be using. Having a variety of lenses is nice to have and convenient if you're going to be shooting a variety of things. However, when it comes to picking a couple lenses when you're going to be bringing your camera out, things are just generally a lot quicker if you have less choices. I think at my most ridiculous point, I had about 6 to 8 lenses, and this made it incredibly difficult to know which camera lenses I'm going to be using when I go shoot. In addition, if I bring multiple lenses to a shoot, I tend to want to switch lenses to see how another lens might look for a certain shot, but the process of changing lenses always just slows down my workflow personally. I think it's totally okay to try out lenses, see if they're right for you. After all, you can always repurchase lenses that you don't end up using. So now I really only hold on to the Canon 24-70 f2.8 as well as the Canon 70-200 f4 IS. And actually right now I'm shooting on the Canon 50mm that I got back borrowing from my brother. But it's a nifty 50 and it's always nice to have one of these. They're so cheap and you have a great value from them. Tip number five is to go through your camera settings and set custom shooting modes and function buttons. I find this particularly useful when I'm switching between product photography and portrait photography because I'm going to be using very different settings. If I'm going to be doing product, I tend to want to have a deep depth of field and shutter speed doesn't matter as much for that. But for something like portrait photography, I want to have my aperture wide open most of the time. So I set a custom shooting mode on my camera for product photography and one for portrait photography. This is especially useful when I just need to grab my camera and go out for a shoot. And this makes setup a whole lot quicker because I don't have to adjust my settings as much. But of course, this would be a preference thing. Your shooting mode will be dependent on how you shoot and what type of subjects you're going to be shooting. So I would play around with how you shoot and create different shooting modes for your style of shooting. I would also love to hear if you guys have any major tips that you guys use that help your photography workflow in the comment section down below. So be sure to leave a comment for something I might not have mentioned. Anyways, that's all there is for this week. Feel free to give me a thumbs up down below. For those of you who are new to my channel, I post weekly videos about my journey in photography, my process, talking also about my freelance experience and gear reviews. If that's something you might be interested in, also be sure to subscribe down below so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye.